Hi guys, I'm here today with amazing food and drink to do some filming of Martry Mill. My name is James Tallon and I'm the miller here. I've been the miller here since about 2019. My role here is to make amazing flour with locally produced grain to service the local bakers, local shops around County Meath and in surrounding areas. So if you come with us today, we're going to take a tour around the mill. We're going to learn all about how the water is harnessed to create the power to drive the pre-industrial revolution millstones to make a fantastic and natural flour for people all around County Meath and surrounding areas to enjoy. So follow us on now, we'll take a walk inside and have a look around the old mill. Before we go inside to take a look at the internal machinery, just take a minute to understand how the water power is harnessed. For every mill, the crucial element is having a weir across the river. The weir across the river creates the level change, and it's the falling water from the level change that's creating the power to turn the mill wheel like we see here. Behind the mill wheel, the level change right directly behind the mill wheel that you see in the river is replicated in the mill race. And when we open up the sluice gate at the back of the mill wheel, the water pours through the sluice gate. On the mill wheel, the paddles of wood, they're all very, very close to the mill race walls. They run within a centimetre of the walls. So when we open up the sluice gate, the water coming through the sluice gate, all of the power from that water is transferred into the wheel. There's nowhere for any of that power to escape. It hits the paddles and is transferred into the shaft of the wheel. The shaft of the wheel feeds through into the mill, and that will turn a series of more wheels that are all linked up to the millstones to create the beautiful flour. So if you'd like to follow us on inside, we'll go on inside and see how all that works. So this is our wheat store here at Martry Mill. In the past, wheat would have arrived in the mill in great big sacks via horse and cart, would have been stored in the sacks. We would have had cats in the mill at that point working as pest control. However, nowadays we can no longer have cats in the mill, so it's safe to store our grain in a great big room like this. Once the wheat gets to the mill, it comes in this window here from the truck via a big pipe. It takes less than an hour to get about 30 tonne of grain into this storage room. And the process from here, as you can see, the grain is pretty clean. The Drummonds do a great job in giving us the best quality wheat, a grade A millable wheat. But we do have further cleaning processes before we bring the wheat to the millstones. This great blue pipe that you see here, it has an internal auger system. The grain is sucked up by the auger into a vacuum machine in the corner. And the vacuum machine is going to hoover the wheat. The grain is too heavy, but these loose particles, the light particles that you see coming off the shovel of wheat, the shell and some dust, that will be removed by the extraction fan into a bag for disposal. And then the rest of the clean wheat is blown across via a blower through pipes over to the hopper at the other side of the mill. Once the grain reaches the hopper, it goes through another sieve to remove any bigger particles that shouldn't be in there. From there we use gravity. The hopper is above the millstones. Gravity takes the grain to the millstones, and then from there, the gravity takes the flour downstairs to a meal box where we collect it below. So you've seen our wheat loft. We're going to follow the wheat now. It's blowing over to the very top level of the old mill, and in the old mill it will be relying on gravity, falling down from the hopper level down to the millstone level and down to the very bottom level where we collect it in the meal box. So we go on over and have a look. So this third level here on the old mill section was built in the 1740s by a miller named Matthew Lee to extend the existing mill. So at that time the mill here would have been quite small, a little two-storey building. It didn't have the middle section and the end section where the wheat store is. The extension was probably commissioned as a result of a famine in the early 1740s. So this room then was built along up at the top to have extra storage space for grain, so that you could save some of previous year's harvests in case the following year had famine conditions or if there was a problem with the crop. Nowadays, the primary function of this room is to house our hopper. So this is our hopper right here. The grain arrives from the wheat store through this hollow metal pipe. It pumps out the top here and goes through another sieve. The sieve is to remove any bigger particles. You wouldn't want a big stone, for example, going between the millstones. On the hopper here, it's a very useful tool for any tour, but in particular for school tours. It's a very good explanation of how the mill itself works. So it covers the water power. So the water power is generated here with the mill wheel. That power feeds through into the mill via a big shaft, connecting into the pit wheel, which is the sunken wheel at the back once you go inside the door of the mill. This is linked into a wallower, which is another metal wheel below the great spur wheel. And the great spur wheel is the biggest wheel downstairs. It's the engine, the driving room of all the machinery. The great spur wheel will have wooden cogs because it connects to the pinions, and there's 4 different pinions downstairs. Each pinion is connected to either a millstone. There's 3 for the millstones, and there's a 4th pinion for a drive shaft. And the drive shaft, the millstones, the pinion turns the runner stone on the millstone. It's kind of self-explanatory. The drive shaft is a shaft that runs down on the 2nd level, just down the middle of the mill here, and various different machines in the mill, such as this bucket elevator. We can see here some belts. The bucket elevator, there's hollow columns in here, and before we had blowing machines and fancy metal pipes like we have over there for transporting the grain, it was possible to run a bucket elevator. There's a hollowed out section there, and a section of belt with little buckets on it will collect grain from a bin at the bottom of the mill and transport it up to the top of the mill. It'll come out right here. You can strap a bag on right here and collect your grain, and then you can throw your grain into either your oats hopper or your wheat hopper. A hopper will have a cone type shaped bottom. You can see at the very bottom is feeding through the floor. The cone will work its way into a series of chutes and pipes that control the flow of the wheat into the millstone. We want to control the feed. It needs to be fed in at a very, very slow pace, essentially drip feeding the wheat in between the millstones. So this floor here is the middle section of the old mill, and it's actually where the transformation from grain to flour takes place. The wheat, feeds down from the hopper below and in between the millstones, and when it leaves this floor, it's falling down to the bottom level as flour. So over here in the millstone section of the room, we've got 3 different millstones, one from Ireland, one from England, and one from France. So this old millstone here is the Irish millstone. A soft stone in a milling context would be used for deshelling rather than for making flour. So it was used to separate the millable part of the oat from the waste part of the oat. And these millstones would have, like the other millstones in the room, would have had a cover around it when it was in operation. And the finished product is going to escape through a hole in the floor. When it gets downstairs, it goes through a wallower. The wallower kind of is further refining of separating the millable part of the grain. The millable part of the grain then was sent back upstairs through our elevator, our bucket elevator. These wooden columns, it was refurbished in about 2012. Because they were hollow, they had the woodworm had got at them. But inside you have a thick felt belt with buckets on it, and the buckets will pick up the millable part of the oat from the bin below, down between the Derbyshire peak stone and that would have made the oatmeal for porridge and oatmeal flour back in the day. However, the stone got damaged at some stage, we think in the 1950s, and the oats discontinued here at this mill. So since that time, my family has focused primarily on making a great wheat flour. So the millstones here come from France, the Bure region of France, so they're called Bure stones. They come in a pair, like all millstones. You have the bed stone at the bottom and the runner stone on top. The runner stone, our runner stone is quite big. Typically a runner stone will do upwards of 100 revolutions per minute. However, because this millstone's oversized, about 80 revolutions per minute is right for the stone. The bed stone stays still. The runner stone is doing about 80 revolutions. So the grain is going to drop down between the stones. This part here is called the damsel. The damsel will be rotating and it is going to move the shoe from side to side, dropping the grain into the central mechanism, which kicks the grain out in between the millstones. So there's a gap at the bottom of the runner stone, which allows the grain to land onto the bed stones. And on the bed stones and the runner stones, we've got a series of grooves cut into the stone, into the face of the stone. You can't see it from here, but the face of the stone has this series of grooves which is known as harps. And these harps intersect with each other when the runner stone is rotating above the bed stone. And the intersecting of these harps allows for the grain to be chopped up more and more finely as it works its way from the inside of the stone out to the outside of the stone. So this is the room in the mill where I spend most of my time. It's where the flour arrives in the meal bin over in the corner from the millstones above. So it's where we do our packaging. From a visual perspective though, when you walk in the door, you can't help but notice the giant wheels turning in front of you. The wheel at the back that is sunken into a pit is called the pit wheel. The pit wheel is being powered directly from the mill wheel outside. The power generated by the wooden mill wheel is fed through a big hole in the wall via a shaft and into the pit wheel here at the back. And the pit wheel linked in directly with the little one in the middle, which is called the wallower. And the wallower then is linked to this big wheel directly above it, which is called the great spur wheel. This great spur wheel then is the engine for the whole mill, for all the machines. How the machines run off the water power, they're all connected up to these little gears. They're called pinions. So there's 4 pinions around the great spur wheel. There's a couple in at the back as well. And to operate the machines off the water power, first of all, you need to stop the great spur wheel. And once the great spur wheel is stopped, you line up the wooden cogs in the great spur wheel with the metal cogs in the pinion that you want to run off the water power. And from there, it's a simple case of either using a wheel like this, or on this one here, there's a bar. You twist the bar down and that'll lower the pinion in between the cogs, and that'll power your millstones upstairs or your drive shaft. The cogs on the great spur wheel, they're all made from wood, because once we turn, the pinion starts turning, it kind of works like the back of your watch. The big wheel goes quite slowly, but then the little wheel that's connected to the big wheel, it will be absolutely racing. So in a mill where there's a lot of dust and there's a lot of dry old wood, if we had metal on metal, you'd be creating sparks. And with the dry wood and the dust, that would only add to the problem, and you could potentially cause a fire. So this is why we have the wooden cogs on the great spur wheel. But the place in this room where I spend my time is generally over here. This is where we collect the flour. You can see we've been doing some grinding here already today. There's a little peak of flour from the mill box. So we collect the flour in the box. Using the scups then, I'm going to fill these 2 kilo packs for the shops. We also have these 20 kilo sacks. These are much easier to fill because there's less manual effort involved. So this is where we collect our flour in our meal box at the very bottom of the mill. The millstone is directly above this pinion here. We saw upstairs at the side of the millstone there is a hole in the floor where the flour escapes, and this is where the flour is escaping to. It's coming down this chute. It goes through a sieve system here, another sieve. This will remove if a piece of straw, tiny piece of straw comes through. The sieve inside here is fine, or it will remove this and ensures we have a very clean flour. But the waste coming off is collecting in this bag. So to make a good healthy flour, you want to use all of the whole wheat, good quality whole wheat and good stone ground process. So we put the mill on real quick here, just to show you how we pack a couple of 2 kilo packages for our customers. You can find these in Super Values in County Meath or local shops and Nolan's in Dublin. We've quite an extensive supply network. There's details on our website. But yeah, I'll turn it on real quick. First of all, we're going to open up the millstones a little bit. Pushing that lever effectively lifts the runner stone by a couple of millimeters, which helps it to get a little bit of momentum and helps the stone to get going. So we're just going to give it a few seconds. So we have our scales over here. And that's 2 packs of flour ready for our shops. Today we're going to go a little step further here in the mill, and we're going to process some of this flour into its next stage and make a little bit of bread. And that's just about enough flour to make a nice traditional loaf of brown bread. Hey guys, welcome to our baking basement. In more recent times, we've been using it as a baking classroom, as a baking studio, giving young students an opportunity to learn all about the history of mills, the history of flour and grain consumption in Ireland. They also have the opportunity to make a loaf of bread to take home with them. Alright guys, today you've seen the whole process from wheat to flour, and now we're going to make some bread. So just a little bit about our ingredients before we get into the bread baking. We use buttermilk. Buttermilk is quite acidic, and the acid in the buttermilk reacts with the different ingredients, in particular with the sodium bicarbonate. And that reaction helps our bread to rise and gives us a nice airy loaf. So we're going to add about a teaspoon of salt. A lot of people will call brown wheaten bread, they'll call it soda bread because it's such a key ingredient as the rising agent. The other 2 dry ingredients are the wheat flour. So I use some plain white flour, about 40% plain white flour, 60% brown flour. The plain flour increases the amount of particles in the mix, which again helps the bread to rise. Each one of these white grains of wheat, can be broken into 3 different parts. The white flour is just the center part of the grain. It's called the endosperm, and the endosperm is quite heavy in starch and quite low in nutrients. Most of the good nutritional content of wheat is either in the bran, and to a greater extent is in the germ, which is just underneath the bran. All of that goodness is in the brown flour. So this is why people say that it's much healthier to have some brown bread as opposed to always going for the easier option in the white toast. So we're going to get into the baking. It's a very, very, very simple process. We've got our brown flour is going to be first into the bowl. We just add it all in, just like that. We don't need to sieve it or anything. White flour though, it tends to stick together a little bit more. So it's better to sieve your white flour. So we're going to add some white flour into the sieve, just like that. We're going to add about a teaspoon of salt. I wouldn't say a heaped teaspoon, I'd just say a fairly flat teaspoon. Just add that into the mix as well. And then is your bread soda. For your bread soda, you want a heaped teaspoon, something like this is plenty. If they're not evenly mixed, your loaf isn't going to rise evenly, for starters, because the bread soda hasn't been evenly distributed. And then the last ingredient that we're going to add, before we add it, we'll make a little bowl in the middle, a little hole, a little well. And then give our buttermilk a bit of a shake. So in terms of the measurements, we had 300 grams of the Martry Mill flour, 200 grams of white flour, and we're going to add about 450 to 500 mils of buttermilk. So just right into the middle of our mix. Now once you add the buttermilk, you don't want to use your hands anymore, the dough will stick to your hands. So just use a spatula, and that's essentially what's going to make your brown bread. I have greased the bread loaf tin with some butter all the way. It's important to get it all the way up to the tops and thoroughly grease the tin. If you put on too much butter, that's going to burn the crust. So something like this is about right. And then it's a simple case of getting the dough into your tin, or not so simple. This is probably the trickiest part. We've preheated the oven here to about 220 degrees. You need a good hot oven for making bread. So in your preheated oven, just slip your loaf in the middle of the shelf if you can. The baking time is going to be about 50 minutes. There's a couple of different ways that you can check whether your loaf is fully baked. If you put a skewer through the middle and it comes up clean, yeah, it's pretty good. It means it's cooked through to the middle. And then the other thing is, once you get it out of the bread loaf, if you give it a little, it sounds kind of hollow, so the hollow sound. So it's a lovely, delicious loaf of Martry Mill bread, ready for us to enjoy. There's a multitude of toppings that you can enjoy with brown bread. For me, I like a bit of butter. My favourite topping of all, I guess, to go with the butter would be some nice ham and a bit of Coleman's mustard is really, really tasty. Thanks for joining us today at Martry Mill. I hope you learned plenty about traditional milling and traditional bread production. Thanks for watching us on Amazing Food and Drink. Like and subscribe, you'll find a lot more great local food producers. If you want to come and visit us here at Martry Mill, we do private tours for larger groups, so if you have a group, reach out to us on our website or on our email address. You're welcome to come and visit us and see Martry Mill for yourselves and enjoy a tour here. The interactive element of the baking will keep you busy, and you'll have an enjoyable and educational experience here at Martry Mill. Thanks again for watching. All the best, James.